well met, folks. This is Laverne with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about Syrinscape and how this is to be integrated or potentially integrated into Fantasy Grounds. So, if you're a game master and you've got a little bit of practice under your belt, I would recommend kind of learning the interface a little bit and getting familiar with the UI before diving into audio, because that can add a whole nother dimension of frustration if you're not certain about how this stuff works together. And that's some of the things I want to discuss in this particular video. So first and foremost, I have Fantasy Grounds up and running. And this is the Dnd5e rule set, which is the most supported rule set in Fantasy Grounds so far, although I think Pathfinder and other rule sets are growing. Also, there are only the official sound sets for the D&D rule set and Pathfinder 2. Now, the actual Syrinscape supports more rule sets, but Fantasy Grounds hasn't really expanded much of their library yet. I don't know if they're going to or what's happening in that front. I'm thinking about volunteering and seeing if I can get some cyberpunk stuff done. We'll see. So essentially, I want to discuss some few things right off the get-go. So you got to have at least a standard license for Fantasy Grounds for this to help. If you don't, it's really difficult to use, and you won't be using it. Another thing is, I'm not going to be talking too much about custom audio. I know a lot of people don't want to pay for a Syrinscape subscription, which I understand. But this setup in this way, I'm going to be doing this is using the Super Syrinscape subscription, which is roughly $10 a month or $20 a year. And I think on their website just recently, I noticed they have a 20% off a year subscription. So if you want to buy, that's their Black Friday sale. So if you want to invest in it, it's be a good time to do it. I think that would equate to roughly $120 with taxes in US dollars, or you can do it monthly still if you want. I'm not sure exactly what the price will work out to, but these are the main supported rule sets, and they do a pretty good job. I mean, they don't cover everything, but they got a lot of things covered, and they do have official licensing to use the D&D rule set and these other ones mentioned here, Pathfinder 2 also. If you wanted to do something custom, it's a completely different avenue. You essentially have to find a way to route the audio, and you also have to find and build your own triggers. Matacure actually has a really nice setup on the Fantasy Grounds Forge, but there again, that requires a Syrinscape account. And then also, if you want to do local audio, it's a whole nother thing. So I'm posting links up to this is basically how to set up Syrinscape with Fantasy Grounds. So this is the way to do it. They also cover local audio, but again, that's a big time sink. So that's mainly why I'm going over the Syrinscape part of this, because the time required to set up and the technical knowledge to set up your personal localized audio requires you to pipe the audio. You have to build all your own triggers. It's a lot of work. So if you're willing to do that, you can always come to this Atlassian Sound Links guide and follow this to help set that up. It's still a lot of work, though, just to let you know ahead of time. Also, there isn't a whole lot of options for the Syrinscape official packs through Fantasy Grounds. So they have the main books and a couple adventures, but they don't have everything covered. So I am going to talk a little bit about custom triggers and stuff, because I think that's an important. And one of the main disconnects, or some of the disconnects that you might find with Fantasy Grounds and Syrinscape, is one, the audio is not hosted on your computer. Basically, all these things are addresses or links that go to the Syrinscape website and trigger the audio through your account. So that's one thing that I think people kind of don't understand about the audio, or some people anyways that are new, is they'll buy these sound packs and they go, wait, where's all the sounds at? And really all it is a bunch of work done in Fantasy Grounds to trigger the audio through Syrinscape, and it does require the subscription. So that's kind of one thing that I noticed over the years, and people are a little bit confused about, is you're not actually getting MP3 files or anything like that. You're just getting the triggers. The next thing is understanding that not everything's covered. So you might have homebrew content that you want to use audio with, and if you don't have these packs here, you're going to have to do them yourself. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but essentially you'll have to create your own links. It's not really hard to do, it's just really time consuming. And to have these packs would suggest that in most cases that you're going to be running this adventure. However, if you don't plan on running any of these adventures and you just want a starting point, I would just get the player's handbook, the monster manual. That would be probably your biggest help for triggers that you would use for your players and for spells and combat. And if you like Pathfinder, they have a couple rule books for that too. So if you're going to do Pathfinder, they have the core rules here and the bestiary one. I think those are your best bet if you're someone who does homebrew and you don't run the adventure paths or anything like that. So I would recommend those over getting everything, because if you're not going to run these adventures, most of this stuff probably won't help you much. Those would require building custom links if you have a module that's not yet part of the Fantasy Grounds official content. So maybe you wanted a different adventure, but they do have Lost Mine of Fendelver. This is the classic one. They have the Witch Beyond the Wildlight, and then they have Curse of Strahd, they have Dragonlance, and that's about it for right now as far as the sound links go for D&D. And then Pathfinder just has a couple books too. So I'm not sure what's happening on the Smiteworks part. I might write to them and find out if they're going to continue this or what's going on. But nonetheless, it's a lot of work. And I think that's part of the issue, is that you have to kind of know the content if you're going to make an official, content for these links. And then you kind of have to know what needs to happen or how to link these things when it comes to certain scenarios and certain aspects of the game. And I think that's where a lot of the trouble comes in with time and the understanding of how that works. And I think that's one of the other disconnects that a lot of people have. And then the other disconnect, I'll demonstrate this later, but essentially, if you're the game master, you want to be logged in to your account on Syrinscape, and you have to set that up through Fantasy Grounds. And one of the things I believe that most users do is they'll try to run their audio from the website, meaning that they'll use the dashboard. So, I have a dashboard that I can use for setting up audio, but this is basically what I have set for right now. And this is the URL up here that I would use to trigger the sounds. Now, if you create a new sound trigger, it may not trigger this particular sound set in the fashion that you want. And if you're going to use the web player, your players have to keep this page open, and you also will, because this is how the sound is transported through Fantasy Grounds through the interface. So you have to decide, what is important to you and what sort of sound sets you're going to be using during your gameplay. And I think that's something that's important to recognize. So this is another session that I have set up somewhere else. So this is not even part of this campaign. And I think that's one way that you can get confused. So I'm going to actually go to new game, and then I have it set up already in my Syrinscape player down here on the bottom of the screen. So down at the bottom here, I already have that set up, and I'm going to change the address to that because that's going to impact what sounds are played. And I believe this is where a lot of people try to manage their game in Fantasy Grounds. And this is good for setting up your own custom sound sets or doing research. But honestly, from here, you want to use the Fantasy Grounds interface and not come through here. This is just for playing. But if you want to sample what the sounds are and do some research, go through the sound sets, you can do that here. But it's better if you actually do it through Fantasy Grounds, and I'll go through that with you. So that's probably the first hurdle, is getting your account set up and then getting everything linked together. So I'm not going to do a full-on tutorial. Like I said, I'll have the links to the Fantasy Grounds integration from the actual Using sound links is the name of the article, and this talks to you about how to set up your account, all that stuff. I'm going to do some of this stuff for you, and then I'm going to get into more of the custom part of this because I think most people kind of know how to use Fantasy Grounds, hopefully, when they start using the product. So that helps a lot if you kind of know what's going on with Fantasy Grounds. This is, I think, I consider this kind of an intermediate thing. I wouldn't recommend this for someone brand new to Fantasy Grounds, only because there's uh, a little bit of kind of knowledge that would be required to use it. But once you get familiar with the interface and with the content that you're going to be running, this makes this a whole lot easier. So let's go back into actually go back into Fantasy Grounds. So what I want to do today is assign some sounds for Grubnar here. So in previous videos, I've been doing all kinds of stuff. I made his Bastion. We built his character. I have an NPC version of Grubnar here. So he's kind of like our mascot, I guess. And what I'm going to do is set up some actions or some triggers for his actual sounds that I would like him to make. And then we can also attach those to his Bastion or whatever you want to do. But this will help you kind of understand the process of creating your own custom sound links, because there's a lot of content out there that doesn't have the official pack set up yet, or I don't know if they're even going to. But nonetheless, there is a way you can do it, and that's through the sound context menu. So there's a couple main things in the audio that you have to understand. So in options, when you're in Fantasy Grounds, you need to make sure that enable sound is on. If you don't intend to use audio, you can turn this off. This just gets rid of the extra button over here, but by default, this is already on, so you don't have to worry about it. But it gets rid of the sound sets and the actual audio links. But nonetheless, make sure that's on. So now what we're going to do is go into, we can look up sound sets. So I don't have any sound sets now because I haven't built any, nor have I loaded any of the official sound sets that come with the Fantasy Grounds player if you have the official sound set. So if you've purchased any of the official content from the store, that would be like this stuff here. So in this case, I would, like I was saying earlier, I would just get the player's handbook and the monster manual, maybe Lost Mine, just so you have an example of how to do adventures. Because the adventures are kind of a separate thing. They're a little bit different than the sound triggers for monsters and for creatures and for combat sounds and spells and such. So they're kind of worked a little differently. One's more focused on the players and the combat tracker, and the other one's more focused on the content that you're presenting, like pictures and maps and such. So there's a little difference in that. So let's go back to Fantasy Grounds and let's start here. So what I want to do is customize some sounds to build those for Grubnar here. So if you need like a starting point or an example, let's say, of how the triggers work, you can load those modules if you purchase them. You don't have to have those, but they really give you a good starting point and they give you an idea of how the stuff is structured. So if I go to modules, right now, all I have are I just have the official content here, but this is 2024. So these rule sets have not been updated to accommodate the links from the Fantasy Grounds player 100% yet. They're probably going to wait till the monster manual comes out. And even then, I don't even know if that's supported. So you want to have the actual supported book. So if I'm going to go to activation, and then I'm going to actually activate the old player's handbook, because that's the book that they're based on. So if I go to the player's handbook, I'm going to load that, and I'm going to load the old monster manual. And so this may be problematic for people who are new that don't realize that. So I'm going to load the legacy 5e content just so I have the actual interface linked up with Syrinscape, because that's what it's based on. And then the monster manual. Now you can do these yourself. Like if you wanted to go through and relink everything, you can do that, but it is a lot of work. So I loaded the official modules just so I have that, and then I'm going to load the Syrinscape modules that go with them. So here's the monster manual sounds. So I'll hit load. And then I want, and as you can see over here, it's actually all these sounds go to specific NPCs. And then I'm going to go to the, I'm just going to type in Syrinscape here just so I can filter that out. So then I want the actual player's handbook, which is the spells, the weapons, you know, that sort of thing. So those are probably your most needed content in regards to the characters, the NPC, and the combat tracker. So if you've got those two modules or the rulebook modules, those are probably the most requested and needed. These other ones are per adventure, and you can kind of build these yourself. It's a lot easier if you just have like the core books, and then if you need an adventure for homebrew or something like that, you can do that yourself. But it's nice to have a starting point. And when you go to click on these, you can see the sound sets and everything that's included. So just about every single monster in the monster manual is covered in here. And those are just sounds that are associated with that creature. So, and those were all manually set up at one point. So what I want to do now is take you over here to sound sets. So this is where, when you purchase those sound link triggers and such in the official sets, which is this stuff here, that's what all this is. And these are spells. Like here's all the generic spell links for generic spells, and then there's specific ones for death triggers, damage triggers, attack or item triggers, so like certain weapons. So there's 20 pages of these, so there's a ton of them. So this is where a lot of the work is. So if you wanted to like do this for your own rule set, customized, you can, but you're going to be doing a lot of linking and a lot of this stuff, building these out. So you have to figure out what sound to use and all that stuff. So it's a lot of work. So, you know, I'm not going to lie, if you're going to do homebrew or you're going to make your own adventure and you want to do sound, this is the sort of thing you're going to be looking at. And we'll do a custom one here shortly. So these are divided by types and then by the book or the resource. So what I'm going to do is make a custom directory or custom group. So I'm going to click on add category, and right now it just says group 1. So I'm just going to edit that with the edit button, and I'm going to make this for Grubnar here. So if you had several characters, I'd make a sound collection for each one. And the only reason I would do this is for immersion or for more fun, I guess. It depends on what you think fun is, because doing all these links isn't fun initially, but once you get them set up, it's pretty nice. So here's Grubnar's section. Now we haven't done anything with this yet, but this is essentially where I'm going to store all the sounds that I want to associate with Grubnar the Goblin here. And normally when you make an attack or something of that nature, it's going to trigger the audio depending on what you're doing. So let me see if this is even set up right. So this is the thing that you'll have to do before you. So I'm just going to make an attack roll. And then I'll do a damage roll. So this will come up the first time. So you want to say yes to all. And there's your sound. So that's you have to agree to that link. But that basically sent the link to Syrinscape. And then the sound emits through the web player, in which you have to have this open. Otherwise, if you don't, you're not going to hear the sound. And I think that comes up occasionally when people are playing, is they forget and they'll close this sound link down. So what I can do here is going into the actual sound links when you're going to go set up your content. So there's player, there's library, here's tools. So under tools, we can go to the sound context menu and go to settings. And what that will do is bring this up. And this is where you're going to import all of your content. And it'll pull in whatever collections that are part of your subscription. And that's what all these are. And when you're getting ready to build your own content, you do all the searches through here. You don't want to skip around on the web page. You want to do everything through here, because this is where all the work is. This is where the integration actually exists. If you do it from the web page from here, you're not necessarily going to have the ability to trigger the items that you want. You'll have to do everything manually, which isn't a bad thing, but just let you know that ahead of time. And then you have to generate an invite and a link for your players. So if I hit generate and yes to all, this is going to create basically an invite or a new sound session. And then you're going to click on invite, and that has the sound session controls and the session for your players. So one is for the GM, which is hidden, and then one's for the player. So if I click on this link, it's going to take me to the sound player here. And then I'm going to actually close this version. So then if you want to activate the web audio context, you're going to click on that, and that will help with that. So that's part of it. And then for the players in Fantasy Grounds, once they have this link, if they click on this, that's going to take them to the web player. So this is kind of where things get a little bit convoluted, or they get kind of lost in translation. So this is what has to be open for your players and for your GM. Now, right now, I have a different thing going on. I have a whole different instance of Syrinscape playing in the background. And I think this is one of the disconnects that happens, is like you'll start a new session because you might lose the links that are provided here. So what I suggest you do is take these links and at least put them down in the hotkeys in case you or your players mistakenly lose those. Because what I think what's happening in some cases is the GMs will generate new links, which no longer would correspond with the original ones. So you may not get the audio to play through the player because you've essentially created a whole new session. So you only want to do this part once when you generate a URL and the invite, and then you want to save these two links because they'll scroll away and then you won't have access to them unless you go all the way back through your history. So keep these two links handy, and then ask your players when they click on this link and it opens up the link to the player that they bookmark the actual link. So when you guys go to play again, all they have to do is click on the link on their browser instead of trying to figure out where this went. Or if they want to, I think they can drag this link into the hotkeys. That would be helpful. So I think that's where a lot of people get confused, like, oh, I don't get any sound or there's no audio. Well, it's because you created a whole nother session. And what I need to do now is take this address from the browser itself, like this thing up here, and use that and make a shortcut for it. So that way, now I have a shortcut so I can click on that the next time I play as a player. And I can do the GM instance too. But now I'm going to copy and paste this item into my interface here. This is my OBS. So if you wanted to play this separately for your stream, and then you have desktop audio that will be piped into Discord for your players if you want to do it that way. But again, that requires more setup. But if you want the web player to play, that's a lot easier to do. And now what I'm going to do is go into the properties of this and change the URL, because I don't want to play my old session. I have, this is a new session. So what I'm going to do is go in here and go into the properties. Oops, that's not right. I need to fix it here. So here's the Syrinscape audio, this little window down below. I'm going to unlock this, go to properties, and this is the address. And then you want to click on control audio via Streamlabs desktop. That way you can change the audio volume for the stream. And I hit control V as in Victor, and that changed the session. So now there's no audio because I haven't triggered anything yet. But that's how you would set it up for OBS or whatever program you're using to trigger the audio or to play the audio for your fans if you're going to stream online. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and start setting up the Grubnar's content here. So what I want to do is just create some simple context menus for Grubnar here. So there's a couple of different things we can do, and you want to set it up to where it's not annoying. What I mean by that is if you have like a sound that plays constantly, you don't want that. So what I would do is recommend maybe a cast type action on the character sheet. So what I might do with this is create a new section, and these would be like little audio emotes that your players could use occasionally. I'd encourage them not to spam it because I know people like playing around. It gets annoying. But you would go to edit list, and what I'm going to do is create a unique section for just the audio triggers for this character. So it'll automatically trigger weapons and spells, but there's no emotive triggers really. I want some goblin sound, so that's kind of why I'm doing this. So it kind of ties in with Grubnar, but it also ties into making custom links in Syrinscape, just so you have more uses and a lot more things that you might want to incorporate into getting the most out of your subscription with Syrinscape. Because if you don't take advantage of this type of thing, then you're kind of locked into whatever is provided to you, and it's really not that as useful unless you really start digging into it. So what we're going to do here is go ahead and I'm going to do some research. So I want to search by name. So I'm going to do something like goblin, and I'm going to look through the list and see if anything sticks out that I want to use for him. So let's just do this. So here's some goblin sounds, and you could filter it out. So perhaps a one shot, because I don't want I don't want environmental audio. I want just like sounds. So here's a goblin laugh. I might use that. So are we going to get it to play or what? And this is another thing, is when you first start, sometimes you have to refresh the browser, and you have to get it to, to trigger. So I want to see if any of these are going to work. So yeah, so there we go. So you might use that, as something you might want to use for your goblin. Here's a goblin attack. So maybe these different emotes you might use for whatever you think. No, I wouldn't use that one. But here's a battle joy thing. So you might use these as little emotes that you would trigger occasionally during gameplay. So maybe when it becomes your turn, you can, if you're a player or GM, you can trigger a sound so that this would kind of make it a little bit more fun. So what I'm going to do is click on the this edit list thing here. And then I'm going to make a new power group. So let's say add power down here, this little hand. And this is just going to make a new group. That's basically all this is. And then if I go into edit, what I'm just going to do is just put Grubnar's audio, I guess, is what I might call it. So Grubnar's audio triggers or something like that. So this is just just a placeholder. And then I'll go ahead and put that over here on the right so that it actually makes a group called Grubnar's audio trigger. So this is just a placeholder for now. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to take and add my own custom audio triggers from this space here. So what I might do is add another blank here, and we'll call this, let's say just goblin. Let's listen to that one again. Yeah, so that's just a generic one. So let's just say generic goblin, something like that. And what we'll do is we'll add a cast feature to it. That way it's triggered in the chat. So that's something that you'll have to set that up manually. And that's kind of how the monster manual and the player's handbook is set up. So what we'll do is under Grubnar's group here for this goblin sound, this one particular sound, we'll set up a trigger. So I'm going to go to edit list, or you can add item. And what we'll do is we'll title it the same. So here's Grubnar. We'll say this will be goblin generic or something, just so we know this is kind of like the generic audio. Now we have to pick the type. So it could be a chat trigger, it can be a cast or attack or any of these others. So I would do cast, is even though you're not really casting a spell or anything, this is how you trigger it. Because if it's a chat trigger, what that's going to do is trigger every time his name comes up or something like that. And that's super annoying. So then what we want to do is find the pattern or the sound. So these are where you would take this and drag and drop this sound into here. So let's go and drop the sound. So that's the sound that we're going to use. And then for the pattern, you would put whatever trigger or whatever you want to use for that particular sound. So let's first of all take and grab the trigger here. Let's see what we got. So this is going to be a cast trigger. We might not even need a pattern, but I'm just going to put Grubnar here because that way it'll look for that. I don't think we necessarily have to have there's other patterns that are a lot more complex that you can use. But this is basically how we're going to trigger it manually through the character sheet. And we've already researched, we're just going to use this one generic one, and then it's going to be a one-shot type audio, not environmental or music. And you can filter this out. So use this interface to find your sounds instead of the web player one or the library. Because if you do it through here, it's going to cause issues. You're going to get confused. You can trigger them from the website, but it's better to do it through here or easier once you understand how this works. So now that I have this one sound that I want to trigger, I'm going to go back to this particular section here, which is the audio triggers. And what I'm going to do is right click, add an action, and we're going to do the cast button here. So that's all we're going to do. We don't need to do anything else because all we want is the cast button. And that's going to trigger this cast type subtype with Grubnar's name, I believe. In theory, this should work. So there's no saving throw or attack roll. It's just a cast button, which is like a trigger. So I'm going to basically collapse this, and I'm going to get out of the edit mode. And now we have a cast button. So technically, if I did this right, this should trigger off of his, off of Grubnar. So we'll see. Yeah, so I got to do a little bit more. So let me think about this. So this says Grubnar. Okay, generic goblin. Let's try that. Generic. So I have this wrong, I believe. Goblin. Let's try that. So does it work first? Okay, so we know the sound works. Now we just got to get the pattern correctly. Use as a Lua pattern match. No, we don't need to do that. So let's try it again. So I think I need to do it through the character sheet, and he is on the combat tracker. So that's the other thing. Now let's see if I did this right. So technically this should work. Yeah, there we go. So I just had to change the name. So that's all I had to do is just put this generic goblin as the as the actual sound, and that would create that little situation where I can trigger the sound. Now your player can trigger that as they like, but again, I warn you that that's going to drive you nuts. Now if I change this thing to Grubnar, then I'd have to change this down here. So let me try changing this. So instead of generic goblin, which may not be a good trigger, Grubnar is going to be, I'll say Grubnar Grubnar's emotes. So these are just little emotes that you might use occasionally when you're playing. So we have it set up there, but if I click on the trigger, now it's not going to work because I've changed, I think it's because I changed it. Yeah, so there's nothing in the chat that's going to trigger this because I didn't change this, which is the pattern matching. So what I want to do is make sure that, let me try just Grubnar because that might work too, but that's not exactly what you want. Let me try that. So we'll try Grubnar. Yeah, so it doesn't match the pattern. So I need to take and put this wording in here. So emotes. And that's really the keyword that it's going to look for in the chat. So we're creating a chat trigger here. So let's try that now. So we're going to hit this little trigger cast button here. Did I spell it right? Oh yeah, I didn't put the apostrophe S in here. Now let's do it. Yeah, so there you go. So what all that's saying here is that this trigger name needs to be the same as the pattern match. And that's kind of similar with all the other triggers that you might want to set up. So let's do one more, a battle one. So we'll close this one for now. So that's kind of our generic one. And I'm going to rename this to Grubnar instead of Goblin. It's really important to have these titled and named properly because you're going to have these matching issues if you don't keep track of it. So that's going to trigger this generic goblin sound from your sound library, but you're setting up the chat trigger pattern, which is going to trigger off of whatever your players, in this case, it's the cast button. So the cast button, even though you're not actually casting a spell, it just triggers the audio. So that's kind of, how I want to do it. Now, going back, I'm going to go through this again. So this is important. So you go into your sound set or your sound context menu, and you go to settings. And what I recommend you do, if you're going to do a bunch of these in one day, is link this down below so you have it, so you don't have to keep digging through the interface. So if I close this and I click on my settings here, that'll bring that back up. So that way you're not fighting with the interface. And now I want to do, let's check out the Goblin Battle Joy. Yeah, I don't know if I like that. Goblin Roar. Yeah, that might work. So, I mean, it's a little annoying, but it'll work. So I'll set up a new trigger. So this will be similar to what I did before. So I'll just say Grubnar, we'll say combat or something like that. So these are combat sounds. And then what we'll do is we'll set it up again as a trigger, and it is a cast trigger. And then the audio that we want to use, we just drag this link over to where it says sounds. And then what we'll do, so I'm going to close this now, is make sure that our pattern matches the text on the cast. So I'll turn this other one into Grubnar's, we'll say combat. And then I'm going to right click on it, go to add action, and I'm going to add the cast feature. That's just so I can get that button. You don't have to do anything else to it. And now I'm going to take this actual name of this trigger that I made and put it up here for the pattern that it's going to look for in the chat. And that's going to help you differentiate between different sounds. And then now you have a few emotes. I don't think you need a bunch of them. I think 3 or 4 is good enough. I mean, your players are going to spam the hell out of it anyways. So that's one thing I recommend you have a discussion with them before you play so they don't act too crazy. So there you go. So that might be something that your players would do occasionally, like right before they go into attack or something. But if they keep repeatedly putting that, triggering that audio, that's going to be very disruptive. So it kind of depends on your table, your group. I wouldn't recommend this if you got a bunch of new people that like to be disruptive. I think this would be helpful like during a game, during a high point where everyone's, in the middle of combat or something, to trigger this. And then maybe in role playing, or like if you guys are just kind of walking around, you can trigger this one. It almost sounds like Schmeagol there. Anyway, so that's kind of one way you can do your custom triggers for, for the actual characters or NPCs, is that you set up a trigger, and whenever they cast, which in this case is clicking on this button, it just sets up the cast, which is part of the syntax, and then you have to have the pattern matching for that particular action or whatever you want to define it as. You could do the same for any of these, to be honest, if they have a cast feature. Or if you want to do it just like a generic chat trigger, you can do that, but you got to be careful because anything that has the name goblin in it is going to trigger that one sound. So you kind of want to be more specific. Let's do something else that's more environmental. So I'm going to set up a new group. So that group was for Grubnar, but I'm going to set up a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and click on add category, and I'm going to edit the name. And this is going to be Grubnar's bastion sounds. So when you go into his bastion, like his hideout, this is the sound set that I want to set up for that particular area. So I'm going to stop editing, and now this is the group where I'm going to put his bastion sounds, essentially. So if you are using the 5e rule set, the new 2024 content, where it says locations, this is basically where the bastion stuff is. And I don't know if I have his bastion in here or not. Let me see. Yeah, I don't think I made his here. But there's the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's the rooms. I'll just make a quick one just so you can kind of get an idea. Let me see if his images are in here. Yeah, so here's the actual rat's nest. Let me see if that's still in here. Yeah, here's the rat's nest. So this is basically the bastion that I set up for Grubnar. And the map that I used, I believe, did I link it here? Yeah, so I want to link the map here just in case. So this wasn't the right one. I actually want to delete that one. Okay, so this is the rat's nest that I made. This is his little lair. And what I want to do, first of all, is I should be linking this link here into the GM notes at least. Let me see if I've already done that or not. Yeah, I kind of have a table, the NPC. So what I want to do is probably link that up here more towards the top, the actual map. So this will be helpful for me if I bring up this location. I'll have this linked here. And then what I'll do is this is the actual kind of like, these are the rooms for the bastion itself. So we can set up individual triggers for these if we want to. And then what we'll do is, let's take this, and I want to kind of recenter it. Oops. Okay. So these rooms here are part of the bastion. So when you have links like that, there's a picture. So I'm going to go up to the top, scroll back up. So these are the bedrooms. So you could technically link the bedrooms to these different locations. This is something I wanted to do last time I was doing this video, but that's okay. I already did enough on bastions, but I'm just using this as a continuation for the tutorial. So these are just links that you can pull up. So you can look at you can have a picture assigned to that room, and then it just gets an idea of what the specs are for it. And then another thing you can do with these is I believe you can, let me go to edit. Yeah, so you can add your own descriptions and links here. So you can actually put your sound links in here just so you have them handy. And then what you could do here is set up let's set up a generic one for this base. Okay. So this can be triggered by the actual image. So this is the image name here, I believe, or maybe it's hideout. I'll have to look. So what I'm going to do is change this to Grubnar's hideout because I want it to be more specific to him and not so generic, because hideout can appear in lots of different things. So Grubnar's hideout, we'll call it, which is the rat's nest. So this will be something that we're going to add the actual sound context menu. So if we go to sound sets, now we're going to set up a trigger just for this map. So we're going to click on the add button here, and this is the sounds. And then what we'll do is maybe we'll put the rat's nest. And this is going to be for this common room. So we'll just say like, this is like the basement. I don't remember what I called it. So this is the basement area. And instead of a trigger, it's going to be content. And then the subtype is, it's going to be probably, let's see, what do we have? Oops, content, subtype, story, image. So this is the image link that we're going to link to this. So we did subtype is context, subtype is image, the type is content. So this is how adventures are kind of set up. So we're going to take the image link and put that there. And I want to take this sound set link and put it in this area so it's handy for me. So if I come in here and I want to trigger that sound during role playing, during game time, I can. And now I want to go back to the context menu. And I'll bookmark this just so I have it handy for me later. So I'm going to close this for now and close this. And now what we'll do with the rat's nest thing here is we'll find the sound that we want to use for the rat's nest. So we'll take and put the, so yeah, it's map _ the rat's nest. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the audio links again, which remember I put a link down here. And then what I want to do is type in, we'll say, the type is, let's do some mood music for the area or for the map. And then we're going to type goblin just to see if there's anything. It doesn't have to be goblin, but let's see, cultist, cave, no goblins, beware goblins. Okay, no. Goblin, ambush, no. Fighting goblins. Let's try the distant ones. Let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, kind of, sort of. It does have a kind of, okay, here we go. Goblin camp, nighttime. Let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, we can do that. So maybe this is, but it's kind of outdoorsy, so it doesn't really fit. Let's see if there's anything else. Goblin rooms. Let's see what that sounds like. So this is what takes the time, right? You got to go through and research. Yeah, it might work. I mean, it's for Starfinder, or what is that for? Space goblins. No, let's see. Goblin base camp. That's hobgoblin base camp, but you can use whatever you want. Let me hear that one. So this one is from Waterdeep, Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Hobgoblin base camp. Yeah, Starfinder beginner box. I'm going to use that one because that one's more. Actually, I'll use this other one that I just triggered. So this is Hobgoblin base camp. So even though they're not hobgoblins, it would match close enough. So I'll take that link and I'm going to match it here. And that's the sounds. So all this is going to do now is if I bring up that image in gameplay, that context menu is going to come up. So let me close this. And for now, I'll take the Sebastian. Let me see if I got it linked here. That's the basement. But I want the Bastion also to be linked to this layer for ease of access. Okay, so now what we'll do is I'll close this. And just for now, I'll close this guy. And what I want to do is bring up the sound context. Right now, this the Goblin camp is playing. So let me stop that. Okay, so if I bring up that image, in this case, during gameplay, this sound context menu, you should probably have this available or at least linked somewhere. And then we'll go ahead and take and put this up, bring up the image. And as you can see here, now this is up. This link here is, and you can press on that and hit play. So you still have to manually trigger it. It's just more convenient to have it set up that way. So now playing, here's the context menu. And then you can also take this and trigger it from here too. So it just depends on, what's easier for you. But this is setting up your environmental audio for your gameplay. So that's how that would work for adventures and that sort of thing. So you have NPC player sounds, and then you also have the environmental background stuff. So you have to decide what sounds you want to use. But it's a lot of work because you got to go in and search, figure out what sounds you want to use, set up the triggers, link them so it's convenient, or set them up on your character sheets and use that. And that does take a while. And the nice thing about it is you don't have to do it all at once. You could take your time and kind of just build it as you go. There's nothing that says you got to go in and do everything at once. So that's what I would recommend, is setting up chat triggers, the custom ones, if you are using a lot of homebrew, or if you are someone who just wants to expand what's already out there. So if you already have like an adventure, but you think you're missing some audio, you can kind of add your own links. And you honestly don't even need the adventure ones, and if you know how to do all this yourself. And you really don't even need the player's handbook triggers if you know how to do those. But I think those are a good starting point, because that's a lot of work to do all the spells, all the attack types, all the death sounds. It's way too much. But this is basically how this works. So you can trigger it. Now when I close the map, it closes the context menu. Now I didn't actually stop the audio, but it closed the context menu. So if I want to stop it, I got to actually, hit stop on here. And then if you got a bunch of sounds running in the background that are kind of colliding, you can click stop all. And this is kind of like your control interface. And that will stop all of it. And then you can, of course, set up your volume levels, your default volume levels. So what I usually do is these one shots, I usually turn it down because those generally are louder for some reason. And then the global, I have it set at 80. So it just depends on what your needs are. But if your players have the shortcut that I had recommended, which I put down on my taskbar, they have to have this open. And if they close it, it's not going to, you're not going to hear any sounds. And sometimes you have to open it once to trigger the audio, because if you have it minimized when you're in Fantasy Grounds and you go to trigger for the first time, it may not trigger it. So you'll have to just initially open up the browser and then it will start working. So that's another disconnect I think that happens sometimes, is the GM gets too sidetracked with running the game and he doesn't realize that this player thing isn't really active. So even though it's minimized, that very first time you hit one of these triggers, it may not make the sound because you don't have it. I guess the Windows has to see that it's being in use for the first time. And once you have it set up that first time, it should work as long as you leave the browser window open. So if you close this, you're not going to hear anything. And I think that happens quite a bit during gameplay. So I'm going to bring up the context menu again. So just opening that map here is going to trigger the sound content menu, sound context menu. And if I click on play, it may not play right away because, you know, you didn't do the initial, but I already did the initial, so it is playing. I don't even have the browser maximized, I don't think. Yeah, but you'd have to have it open initially. And I think it's only, sometimes it'll only play for you and not for the players, so you got to watch that. So you want to make sure that you have that link handy, because I think that's one of the things that people go through. And here's this. So, and then your players can control this. So if they don't want it too loud, they can, you know, they can dial it back, or they can turn up the volume. So this is, you know, about halfway up here, or 3/4 is like full volume. But if you need the extra volume, you know, you can put that in here. So hopefully that helps you kind of get an understand of how these things can work together. And you can kind of customize and make your own content. You don't necessarily have to buy the packs on the Fantasy Grounds store, but I do recommend at least getting the player's handbook, the monster manual, or if for Pathfinder, there's the bestiary and the player core book. Those are probably your biggest help. These things, this audio that happens per encounter or as a background sound, I don't think you necessarily have to have those, especially if you know how to set them up yourself. But it does help to know Fantasy Ground. So anyhow, folks, you guys have a good weekend, and hopefully this is helpful. And like I said, it's not for everybody. You know, some people don't want the subscription and all the hassle. So, you know, whatever. I'm not trying to sell you the, you know, buying the subscription every month, although it's required. What I'm trying to show you is that it can be customized and you can use it to increase the immersion in your game, but you don't necessarily have to use it. And sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's not worth my time. You know, it just depends on what you're trying to do. I think if I had a professional game that was a paid game and it was being streamed, and I'd probably use it. If it was just being played at my house, you know, maybe not. So, anyhow, folks, you guys take care. Have a good one, and I'll see you around next time. Bye bye.